So in this video, let's have a look at some diagrams. So by right-clicking on something, let's say here, so this project, you can do it on a class as well. You've got this diagrams submenu here, and we've got show type dependency diagram and show project dependency diagram. There are other ways you can get to these, especially the type dependency one, but let's just start with the project dependency diagram first because that's the simplest. So here's a very simple diagram. Near the end of this video, we're going to show a much more complicated version using a different project. But let's start off simply. So we've got both projects here, and I can drag these. If I want to show and hide them, I've got this pane here, this project diagram pane, and I can just check them and uncheck them, and then they disappear and appear. I can right click and drag around. I can control and scroll wheel to zoom in. There's also various options along the top around zooming, and we can even export. So we can export to an image, or we can save it to a file. You've got this concept of grouping, which is this icon here. Now, if I had solution folders, so if I right click on a solution and say add new solution folder, which is a way of grouping together different projects, then that's what that grouping would show. You've got show transitive references, so that's a reference of a reference. This one is interesting though, enable coupling analysis. So what this does, if I just drag this up, so you can see we've got a blue line here. Coupling analysis actually looks at your code to see if there are actually any real dependencies, if there's any coupling, like with the type system. So I've got this disabled at the moment, and it's worth pointing out that coupling analysis for a big project is quite resource intensive, but it can do the calculations in the background. If I enable this here, then obviously this is a very simple project, and nothing's changed because I do have things in here that are depending on this. And if let's create a new project. It can just be a unit test project. Let's leave it as is, create. And then we add a project reference. So right click here and do reference to the main project, add. And then if we go back to our diagram, so we've now got this. And if I disable and enable coupling analysis, then that's now updated the diagram. And we can see that we've now got this dotted line here. So at a glance, we can see that test project has a dependency on shopping cart lib, but we don't need it because there's no actual coupling between those two projects. If we hover over this blue line, so the thickness of this line when we have coupling analysis enabled is thicker if there's lots of different usages. And if we hover over, we can see there's 8 code usages. If I click on it, then it's going to open them up down here. So this is really powerful for investigating your project references and determining if you actually need those references in the first place. So let's close this, and now let's have a look at the type dependency diagram. So we can go again to here and go to diagrams, and let's choose type dependency diagram now. And because I just did this on the test project, we've only got the unit test class at the moment. Ignore this auto-generated program. And in fact, in this diagram, you can't do this in the project one. The project one, you've got this filter in that pane I showed you before that was here. But in the type dependency diagram, you can press the delete key so you can edit this diagram more. Note that this diagram is not synced with your code. Once you generate it, then you can modify it, but it's not like two-way synced with your code, changing your code. I could have right-clicked on the solution level and done diagram show type, which would have included all the things. Another option is I can start dragging onto this diagram. So I could drag this on, or I could take a specific type. Let's drag this on so we get both types. So because I dragged the project on, then it's added the class, which has no dependencies. It's just, that's something I can actually delete. And we can see that now in the diagram. The shopping cart is being depended on by this. So we can see this blue line here. And again, we can click on this and see usage information. So I can show all usages or I can click on actual ones. It's worth pointing out that if you're trying to drag onto here, and as soon as you click on an item, it actually shows the code in the editor, which is stopping you from dragging it. If you click up here and behavior, you've got these options saying open files, project directories with a single click. If those are selected, that's going to block you from dragging, so make sure those are unselected if that's stopping you from doing this. So again, to interact with this, we can drag these around. We can control mouse wheel to zoom in and out. We can right click to pan. You can also hold down the Alt key to zoom in. So if I zoom out a bit and hold down the Alt key, it is flicking a bit there. Not sure why, but if I let go, so that's a good way if you've got a really complicated diagram of zooming in temporarily in different areas of the diagram. And again, later on, we're going to show a much more complicated solution to show a much more complicated diagram. If I control mouse wheel, zoom in a bit more, and let's delete this. I'm going to show you another way of adding something. So I can click on that and delete. So remember, again, this does not affect the actual source code. In this diagram, if you press the space key, then this pops up and you can search for stuff. So let's do class 1, enter, and that's re-added it. There are different ways we can get this diagram up. So we've already seen right-clicking somewhere here and choosing like diagrams and one of these options. If I close this and close this, let's go to the shopping cart. If I do find usages, so remember Shift and F12 or whatever your mapping is. If you're unsure, you've got your Alt and backtick for navigate to, so it'll show what that shortcut is. Or if Alt and backtick is different, you can click here and view navigate to see that Alt and backtick. Click on this and see your find usages. So when you do that, and you've got the find usages down here at the bottom, then you've got this show on diagram button. So that's another way to get this up. That'll show those usages on a diagram. Another example, let's close that. Let's add an interface to this. So I'm clicking here and I'm doing Control Shift and R, which pops up refactor this. And again, if you're unsure, you can click here or Alt Enter, and you've got the refactor this menu here. So that'll tell you what the shortcut is, or you can just click that. And if I say extract interface, and let's make an interface for both, and then next. So that's now added an interface. If I scroll up, here's this interface. Let's Alt Enter on here and say move it to its own file. Okay. So it's asking if we want to add this to Git. So don't show that again. Yes. And it's doing that because it's a new file. Now what I wanted to show here is if I go to this interface and press Alt and End, then that takes me to the derived type. So going back to this interface again clicking here, navigate to, derive symbols, Alt and Enter, so that was that one. If I create another implementation, so Alt Enter, create derived type, obviously I'll have to call it shopping cart 2 or something other than shopping cart because we've already got one. Alt Enter, implement missing members, then enter again. So that's fine. Now if I go back to iShopping Cart and do that Alt and End, then because there's multiple, we get this drop down to choose which one you want to go to. And note that there is this button again. So there's a few different places when you're finding usages or doing things where you'll see this icon. So if I click on this now, then we can see this dependency diagram. So the interface and the different implementations. Another quick one, if I close this, Alt Enter, and then go down, we've got type hierarchy, which shows this pane on the right. So that's just a different view of what we've just seen. But there is, again, this button here, show on diagram. So as you can see, there's lots of ways we can use this to inspect the dependencies in our solution. But this is a very simple solution. And whilst that was useful for demoing and explaining these different diagrams, it's not very interesting. So let's have a look at a much bigger project. .NET Aspire. If you've not played with .NET Aspire, do it. It's amazing. But obviously that's out of scope of this course. But it's open source, so I downloaded the Aspire source from github.net Aspire. Basically this project. So I've downloaded this. It's not compiling for some reason, but let's ignore that. If we right click on Aspire and do diagrams, let's start off with the show project dependency diagram. And here straight away, we can see that it's grouping these by these solution folders. So if we expand one of these, they've each got, they've each got multiple projects in there. This one's got quite a lot. If I toggle this hide groups, then suddenly it gets a lot more busy. So this is kind of where being able to untick things, we can see down here, we can expand these groupings, these solution folders, and try and narrow it down a bit. So let's hide them all and look at components. So this is a bit more digestible. We can see lots of different components like Cosmos, Elasticsearch, Azure Service Bus, MySQL, Postgres, RabbitMQ, so lots of different ones. We can see some dependencies, so like Redis output caching project is depending on the Stack Exchange Redis. We can see that Azure OpenAI is depending on Aspire OpenAI. So let's close this, and I've no idea what this is going to do, but if I right click and try diagrams, show type dependency diagram on the whole thing, this is going to be a busy diagram. So that took about 30 seconds to get to this point, and it's warning me that it's high resource usage, but let's continue, see what happens. And that is the dependency diagram of the Aspire solution, the whole thing. With that level of detail, I don't know how useful it is, but let's just zoom in a bit and see what we've got. So obviously this is way too noisy. I've got way too much information, but it gives me an opportunity to talk about these different colors. So first up, let's have a look at this green dashed line. So that describes inheritance. So that's an inherited dependency. The blue line is usage dependencies. And you can see that we've got different thicknesses here. So again, the thickness shows how many usages there are. So you get an idea of strength of number of usages by the line thickness. And we can see we've got some thick ones here. We can see some things will have a green line. So that is when it's called an aggregated dependency. So that's either when it's part of a collection or a container of types. A purple line is a return type dependency. So if I drag this over here because it's appearing on my other monitor and hover, there we are. So that was appearing in my other monitor. We can see that named launch profile is a return type. And following that purple line down to here, that's extension methods. So I'm assuming there's something there that does that as a return type. There's also a brown line which indicates a constructor injected dependency. So with dependency injection. A really good reference to the different colors and dotted lines versus straight lines is if you go to the JetBrains documentation. So their documentation is actually really good. And under code analysis, visual dependency analysis, explore type dependency diagram, this section, study dependencies between types, which you can get to here, then it describes each of these and it mentions the color of that entry and here as well. So obviously this is a very extreme example. I got a big project and did everything, but as we say, we can drag from here and just take what we want. You can right click and say diagrams, show type diagram at a different scope. We can drill down and even do it at a file level. So on a project this size, literally doing everything might not be a good idea. And then once you've done it, you can selectively delete. So remember again that once you create your diagram, it's not synced with your code as you're making changes. Or if you modify the diagram, that's not modifying your code. So you can then drag what you want onto it. You can delete what you don't want. And you can save as an image and you can export it. You can drag around the nodes and just position it how you want it. And there are various different filters to configure the diagram in a way that works best for your project and what you're trying to get from that diagram. So that now concludes the end of this module. In the next module, we're going to be having some fun with AI.